I was walking the fairways over and I think I talked about it last week. I was walking the fairways with a pitcher. I said, do you go out there trying to throw a perfect game every day? He was like, no. I go out there trying to get the first guy out. And it's true. Pitchers don't think about that. But golfers think, oh my God, today could be special. Like, I could see myself shooting that perfect day. When in reality, no other sport really walks out there and thinks, I'm going to go 14 of 14 from three-point land. Or I'm going to go, I'm going to throw for 375 in a game. Like, I'm going to try to block it together. But in golf, because of the way we train, and we train to a point of feeling good and feel confident, and the next day we think we're going to replicate that in a completely different. Everybody I've ever worked with in the yips, they've gone along just fine for a period of time. But more than likely, they've had an underlying mechanical flaw that has never come up to the surface. They're jumping along, they're bouncing along, they're chipping, they got a funky grip, they play it weird, they make it work. Okay, a second baseman gets up and they kind of chunk it over to the first baseman, and they're fine. But they've got a little mechanical flaw, and they've been able to play with absolutely no issues until, boom, something happens. They get under an increased pressure, something happens with stress, and what I call the catastrophic event. There's a moment where all of a sudden they go to throw it, and they, short arm it, the ball bounces, and their own teammate starts laughing at them. Ah, ha, ha, ha. So funny. I had a golf pro tell me, PGA teaching professional, really good player. He's like, Doc, I don't play golf anymore. And I said, what was the event? He's like, there wasn't an event. I said, bull, what was the event? And he says, well, all right, there was an event. He said, I was coming down the stretch. I was playing in a pro member. I had a buddy of mine that I was playing with. We have a lot of fun playing together. He's the member. Hey guys, welcome back to Mental Game Live. This is episode number 5. I'm here in my studio tonight. I think we got all the technical bugs worked out, so hopefully you can hear me just fine. Bash, we all good on that? Oh, let me see. I knocked my mic out of the way, so we're going to fix that one more time. See, I am not an expert when it comes to the mic, but I'm here.
You're good, man.
I'm good. Awesome. Got the goat hat on. For those of you who don't know what the goat hat is, this comes from TPC Sawgrass. One time a year during the tournament in the main pro shop, they sell merchandise with the goat on it. I love the goat merchandise. I buy multiple shirts, hats, t-shirts every time because it's a once a year thing. It's kind of like the Masters, but there's a great story about the goat. And when Pete Dye was developing the land for TPC Sawgrass, there was a goat that lived on the land, and that's how it came about. So thanks. Nice lid. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I would have loved one of those. Appreciate the ask.
Well, I am going to Augusta, Bash, so you send me your order, and I think I can take care of you. I leave on Sunday. So,
that's fair.
That's fair. Okay. So thank you for being here. And we're trying to grow Mental Game Live. Guys, I want this to be the one-stop shop for people on the mental game, completely free, always answering your questions to be here. And I need you to be a part of it. I'm on Instagram Live right now, but if you're on Instagram Live, please hit me up on YouTube so you can get your questions answered. In segment number 4 tonight, we are going to dive into some of your questions. Send them to me during the week. Ask me anything. Just posted a bunch up from yesterday on Instagram. But this is what it's all about. So me and Bash are going to have a little bit of fun tonight. We got a really cool guest coming on, Alan Jaeger of Jaeger Sports. And if you know baseball, you know him because he's got the bands that make people stronger. But really, it's about mindfulness, meditation. So whatever sport you play, you're going to get a lot out of this. And Alan and I have been friends for a very long time. And he's got that cool Southern California surfer vibe. So we're going to bring him up here in a little bit and be pumped by that. Let's talk about some things that happened this past weekend, right? Anything good happen in the world of the mind side? I don't know. Maybe we got a good, the bad, and the ugly. Number one. That's what my man Sam Burns is after the Dell match play. Sam Burns dominates out at the Dell match play. And it's a long, long journey, you guys. Dell match play is a 5-day tournament. So they play 3 matches. one on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and the winner of their – what about the bad? No SEC schools in the Final Four. None in the men's Final Four. 2 in the women's. South Carolina, just unanimous number 1, and LSU. Okay? And my alma mater is in there, and Kim Mulkey has returned the team to the Final Four. Now, here's the deal. What happened? The SEC, throughout the course of the year, was one of the most dominant male programs in college sports. Teams were playing good. Something always happens. And one of the things to realize, I remember this from my coach, Bash, is Skip used to always say that the best players have the most pressure in the biggest moments. So Alabama has a great player in Brandon Miller, phenomenal player. He's going to be probably the 3rd pick in the NBA draft. And all the teams scout and go after them. It makes it hard. Makes it really difficult. And so what happens is a team like San Diego State in the Final Four, team like FAU in the Final Four, UConn is my favorite to win it, and Miami, they're senior-laden teams that have worked together and played together for many years. And so their systems tend to outplay individual pursuits. The bad is I think the SEC just didn't get it done, but that doesn't mean it was a bad year. It just sucks. And I think pretty much everybody's bracket is exploded. And so that's the bad. But hate to see that. But let's get the women to finish strong. I'd love to see an LSU South Carolina final. And then I'd be pulling for my purple and gold alma mater to pull this one out. All right, what about the ugly? And I bring this up as an ugly for a reason. Lamar Jackson, Heisman Trophy winner, perennial all-pro, one of the most exciting players in the NFL, is in a nasty little dispute with his team, the Baltimore Ravens. He, according to reports on March 2nd, he has asked for a trade. Now, let me ask you this. This is the ugly. Why is it that top players often feel underappreciated in the biggest moments? Okay. Is it because that the amount of effort it takes and that the sport, particularly football, is a cutthroat sport, that they're trying to get their coverage, they're trying to get their exposure and experience and their money? Maybe. But one of the things I always want my players to do is leave the drama on the side, take care of your business. Now, Lamar Jackson takes care of his business. He could quarterback any program that I'm a part of. I'm a huge fan. But I find it fascinating as to what it is that people don't see his value for. I want to follow this story from a mentality standpoint, and I want to know that when he goes to the new program, the new franchise, how he treats it. I have a feeling he's got a little bit of fire under him now. I think he always has. But he has a little bit more fire under him, and I'm going to be interested to see where he goes and what the impact that he makes. If I had to guess, Baltimore doesn't believe that a franchise quarterback is worth paying what they have to pay. They'd rather build an entire team around a really, really good quarterback, but not overpay for one position. I think that's where the fluff has come from. But why is it that best players tend to get underappreciated? I think it flows into their MO, which is that they got a chip on their shoulder, and the best always do. And I think what we do is with social media and reporting, be able to put that out there. I think Lamar Jackson has been brilliant to not publicize his grievances, but I want to see him get to where he deserves. I think he's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league, and he could quarterback any team that I'm a fan of. Bash, any thoughts on Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I think it's just an interesting deal because I feel like his production's been pretty good. Is it purely a business decision? And I wonder too if the lack of his agent or not having an agent is hurting him too. Like but at the same time, I understand too, because I mean, nobody can sell yourself better than you can, as well as would an agent kind of settle or advise him to settle for something less than he feels he's worth. And so, I applaud him for going after what he feels he's worth. I mean, a lot of people are nervous, maybe scared to do that, and will just settle. And I applaud him for going after it. I mean, look, I watched a lot of these like documentaries and stuff, the Hard Knocks and things. College football so much different than pro football. I mean, these are grown men, families. It's a business. It
is. And somebody like Lamar Jackson needs to get his money now, because one injury, like we saw with Robert Griffin III, you've seen it with Alex
Tua.
Smith.
Seen it with Tua.
Yep. Okay. One injury and their earning potential is gone. Okay. So you have to get your money now. You have to be out there. And so, I think the psychology of feeling underappreciated is one of the best motivators there is. Michael Jordan did that all the time. If you watch his Hall of Fame induction speech or you read the Mindside Manifesto, I talk about it. So I agree with you. All right. In this next segment, get ready. Let's get your mind right. Alan Jager's coming up next on the Mental Game Live.
If you said to me, what's the most important thing you can do to get yourself in a great position with the mental part of the game? I would say it's about getting quiet. How are we going to do that when we live in a noisy environment? We tend to be a very noisy world. I don't mean just literally, I also mean symbolically. The TV, the cell phones, the social media. Spend time each day getting quiet. I've been living in the mental game for 29 years as a coach, teacher of it. So, I've had a lot of raw experience myself practicing meditation for 29 years, seeing the effect it's had on me personally, the effect it's had on players and teams I've worked with. And so I've sort of been on the sidelines like the people before me, the Ken Ravisas of the world and the Bob Rotellas of the world. And there's a saying, you can only get so much blood out of a turnip. And I don't even actually know what that saying means, but it sounds apropos. How much more physical are we going to get out of the human body? I think it's great that guys are throwing another mile an hour harder, or 3 or 4 or 5. Don't get me wrong. I think it's great that guys are hitting the baseball 30 or 40 feet further. At the end of the day, there comes a point where how much more can you tap into physically is the bottom line. Yet, how much more can you tap into mentally? And here's always the rub to that comment. Not only do we all know there's a lot to tap into mentally, but it's the most untapped part comparative to hitting mechanics, pitching mechanics, lifting, nutrition, which is all very, very important. And I've been feeling this way for 29 years. I think the difference now is that the mental game, so to speak, has become mainstream.
Alan, what's up, my man?
Brett, my man, boy, you guys surprised me with that video. So quick backstory. I played at Cal State Northridge, and Paul Tremlin, who did that video, also played at Cal State Northridge about 20 years later, and he got heavy into audio, video, telling stories. And he came out one day because he moved back to, I think he's in Missouri, and he came out and he started doing some shorts, and came out to my place in Santa Monica, and we spent half a day, and it's not just about me, it's just how he wove that together. I just think he's got such a talent. So anyway, I happen to love that little beautiful 5-minute short called The Art of Quiet. So thank you for putting that out there. It really
absolutely. Make sure you check it out, The Art of Quiet on YouTube. Look, when I know somebody and I'm excited to have you on, to me it's cool to kind of find something obscure. And I know that people always hit us up and be like, oh, that's copyright. Like, look, we're just sharing stuff. Okay. And what are we sharing? We're sharing aspects of human performance. You've been in this a long time. I mean, Alan is, give you a little bit of this bio here. I'll pull it up here and I'll read it to you just so you guys understand. So let me just say this, the off the cuff one. If you want to be a thrower and throw better, Alan's one of those dudes. Okay. But that's the baseball world. If you're a golfer or anything like that, Alan is, he's a trainer, consultant. He's worked with Cy Young Award winners. He's worked with the best on helping people focus when it matters the most. And the way that they do that is through mindfulness and meditation. And he asked me a question years ago that I've always held on to. He said, hey, Brett, if you could have gone out and pitched and what did you want? What did you want to be in your disposal? I was like, well, I wanted to feel comfortable. I wanted to feel aggressive. I wanted to be able to attack. He's like, well, what would have kept you from doing that? Just the drama outside of you, right? When you buy into that BS, what happens is you lose your place in where your competitive angst. And so I've always remembered that. I thought that was cool. So can you dive into that a little bit and kind of talk about how meditation helps players, whatever sport you're in? Because I get this question all the time, meditation. I use it, I just don't teach it.
Yeah, look, I mean, real quickly, what you were talking about is what we all talk about in the mental game is the process. And it took me 20 something years to get to this point where the last 7 or 8 years, this is kind of all I've been talking about is, before we get to the meditation piece briefly, is, if you pick 3 things that you said would lead to the best execution of the pitch of your life or shot of your life, what are those 3 things? And so as an example for me as a pitcher, it would be my breathing, my focal point, and attacking my focal point.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that it's those 3 constants versus the trillion other potential interchangeable variables.
Mm-hmm.
So briefly on the process, even though I really, really, of course, want to get to meditation, is that's what you were talking about, of course. And it just could be so helpful for someone to have a revelation and realize I can control 3 things that I'm agreeing lead to the best execution of my life.
It doesn't matter what's happening around you. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can always re-anchor back into those, right?
You could be in China, or you could be in Texas. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be playing in a 7th game of the World Series. You could be in the backyard with your nephew. At the end of the day, for me, I've learned that if I take a good breath, if I have a focal point, which is intention, and if I attack my focal point, which is conviction or commitment, that's it. That's my Bruce Lee 10th degree black belt, if you will. Now I know I've got to just be Bruce Lee 10th degree black belt. If I leave that, I'm not a bad guy. I've just entered the world, to use your word, of drama or distraction.
That's your word. I stole that from you.
Well, I'm re-stealing it back.
Okay.
Meditation, just so we can get to some other things. Like the short of it is this, Brett, and I know I'm saying things that you already know and buy into.
Yeah, but our audience, and this is the cool thing, is I'm bringing you to the golf world. Yeah. A lot of my followers are golfers, and they're trying to play better in their own game. Their minds are swimming with content, technical stuff, and overcoached in technical areas. And I love coaches. This is not a knock at coaches. It's just that they're all like, if I could just do this better, if I could just do that better, then I'll play better. And they're ignoring the competitive side of the psyche. And that's what I want you to kind of, that's why I think meditation can play a role.
Well, what I would say is I usually incorporate these 5 words at some point in any talk or discussion. And I get these from Dr. Shauna Shapiro, who's one of the leaders in the world in mindfulness. And I've done a number of retreats with her, and she's amazing. And the 5 words are, you become what you practice. And if you want to have a better swing or you want to be better at chipping your sand game or your 4-foot putts versus your 17, you're lagging, what do? Well, of course, you do a ton of practicing. And so that's a given. And I think what people don't really understand or don't understand as well is that the mental game is a practice. We can sit there all day long and say, stay in the moment and, finish to your target. And that can be helpful, as we just talked about. But if you don't have, in my opinion, let's call it a formal practice, just like the physical practice, then I just think it's like percentages. It's like math, right? It's like, do I want to be quieter and more relaxed and more clear-minded on the golf course? Do I want to be in the present moment more often? Well, those are skills. So if you can look at skill development mentally and look at it that way instead of the mental game, which might be too ambiguous for people, all of a sudden people, it's more tangible. They're like, okay, yes, if I was more relaxed, I'd play better. Yes, if my mind was clear, I'd play better. Yes, if I stayed in the moment better, I'd play better. Yes, if I wasn't caught up with whether it's a bogey putt or a birdie putt, I'd play better. Well, right. Mental practice in a nutshell is sequestering yourself, is putting yourself aside for the sole intention of being present so that you can start to listen or observe what your mind is saying. Yeah, the same stuff that might happen between the 3rd and 4th hole or the 1st and 2nd shot of a hole. And now all of a sudden what you're doing is you're bringing awareness, which is a word I talk about all the time. If you can meditate each day or do a mindfulness practice each day, even if it's just 5 minutes, and you say, okay, for 5 minutes, I'm going to practice watching my thoughts, but listen to this line. But I'm not going to take the dance with my thoughts. I'm going to be what's called neutral. They can come up, they could be negative, they could be positive, whatever comes up in my mind, I'm going to practice being the observer or the quiet space. It's also called the silent witness of my thoughts. And how that translates is that if you have a practice doing that every day, maybe twice a day, and all of a sudden you start stepping back from your thoughts and you maybe don't take your thoughts so personally, and all of a sudden now the silence behind the thoughts is where you want to be, hence quiet mind equals best game ever is a tweet that we put up there all the time. So just to bring this back and to move on, is establish a practice every day, so all of a sudden you can build and develop skills mentally that are going to enhance your performance and ultimately enhance life.
All right, so let's talk about that, because what I love what you're talking about is, players, one thing I hear them is like, when I play great, I'm not thinking about anything. And I'm like, sometimes you have to think about something to get into synchronicity. It's kind of what I call it, to get in the slot, right? It's hard to have an absent mind unless you're a monk in the Tibetan mountains and you're out there for 35 years. I want people to understand that. But what Alan's talking about is when the mind gets aligned and is non-conflict. And when we start adding conflicts and we start judging, we start adding drama to it, we start making judgmental comments about ourselves because of it, instead of, hey, I got pretty shitty thinking going on right now. That's okay. Like you can just be honest. And I tell players all the time, just be an active tourist. Be in Rome and just observe what's going on without having, and document it. Document it. Like, be aware of it. Like, what's going on versus, oh my God, what's going on? Like, hey, what's going on? Because you can turn the station, you can turn the channel and dial that in. For those of you who are so young, you don't remember cars. You had to dial in that, that to get that static out, right?
Right.
So let's talk about that practice. What is a recommendation? Because you and I had a great interchange about a year ago. I said, when I pitched, I did meditation and yeah, somebody just asked a question. This is all uploaded. It'll be on our archive. It'll be there for eternity. I would visualize, and I would be what Coach Bertman used to say, be the star of your own movie, but also work through the drama that you're going through. Yep. And so I would do that 5 or 10 minutes a day. And now what I do is I like to get to my desk in the morning and I like to immerse myself in the things that I dread, which is the unknown. The unknown of the morning creates the most anxiety for me. And I love to sit there and be immersed in it versus judging it and fighting it. I get there, I drink my coffee, I read today's equivalent of the news, Twitter, Wall Street Journal, whatever, and I just immerse myself in it. And that's my practice. So what are some of the practices that people could utilize and impart in their own game?
I'd say right away, well, number one, be consistent. You don't go to the gym once a week and then say you're good. If you're going to do this, and I hope and pray everybody gives this a try, because if you do this for a few days, you may never leave it for the rest of your life. That's how powerful and profound just a few minutes of meditation can do for someone's life. So give it a chance, but let's just take 5 minutes to make it super simple.
Perfect.
Find a place, turn off all electronics, right? Create a situation where hopefully you're not going to be distracted, and here's a very simple breathing exercise. And the reason the breath, as you know, is so valuable is because, one, the breath is always happening in the present moment. It's a great thing to be aware of. Two, the breath we associate with being very calming and relaxing and cleansing, including cleansing our brain. And three, the breath is not a thought, it's an instinct. And so these are all really good reasons to connect with the breath, on top of the fact of the other reasons. So here's a simple exercise. You literally wait for your inhale to come. And I love what you said earlier. You're a tourist, right? You're not forcing the breath. Just your breath is keeping you alive.
This is big. This is big, guys. Don't force the inhale. Allow it to come as part of your instinct.
Just
I
let
see
it.
So many people are like, and they haven't ever exhaled.
And the other reason, Brad, it's so big is because part of meditation, you're gaining so many skills you don't even realize. For instance, one great skill of allowing your breath to come at its own pace is patience, is trust. Like, these are very, very powerful metaphoric things happening, right? Just waiting and trusting your breath to come when it's ready, patience. So let the inhale come at its own accord. It's going to come because it keeps you, it's going 24 hours a day for you anyway. And when you feel that inhale, I like more visuals than more linear stuff, but whatever is comfortable for somebody. But you can literally visualize like a chalkboard, like a white chalk on a black backwards. You have that beautiful contrast. You could visualize your whole body as a number one, whatever works for you. I like going into black holes and just being in silence and just feeling this, white oneness would be something I would probably want to play with. The exhale then is a 2, and let that come on its own accord. the next inhale is a 3, and the next exhale is a 4. So you're just counting your breath. If you count to maybe 20 or even 30, it'll probably take you about 5 minutes if you're patient and you let the breath dictate the pace. Now, I have to say one other thing that's very important, one of the single most important tools, not only for meditation, but I actually believe for life, is this principle called neutrality.
Mm.
And I know you know where I'm going. And
I love
so
it.
the beauty of this exercise is, yes, you want to stay focused on the exercise, but what if a thought comes in and says, I'm really hungry, or why am I doing this? Or you start thinking about something from the past that's concerning you. The second you hear a thought, well, first of all, you have the breath and the counting to go to as your default. But here's a great concept, which is it's called be neutral. So if a thought comes up, it's not right or wrong or good or bad. Just let it be, and then redirect your attention, which is something you also mentioned earlier, back to the counting. So in a nutshell, inhale 1, exhale 2, inhale 3, exhale 4. Any thoughts come in, be neutral, let them be there, and just keep redirecting your attention back to the counting.
Why this is so important, that people say, I tried that stuff on the golf course. I tried that stuff in a game. Can you imagine a soldier going to war and never having shot their gun? That's what this is the equivalent of. And it changed my life pitching at LSU. And it gave me a way to visualize, because I remember coach used to lay us all down and visualize and gyms and everything. And we'd all be like, fall asleep as soon as we could. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. Like, I saw that. Like, I freaking saw that. And all of a sudden you're like, I've got a tool here that helps me manage. And for golfers, we try to, for so long, the game has been sold as this calming experience that it's actually chaotic. But you are the calming force. It's not necessarily that you have to be calm. It's the fact that you trust and believe the tools that you have in that moment. Because when you take that deep breath and all right, I can accept where I'm at. I don't have to judge it. I don't have to be angry with it, but I can recenter, refocus it. Man, now we're cooking with some gas, because that we fight and we resist so much. And that neutrality is critical for people out there. How can coaches implement this? Because I know there's some videos of people that you've impacted that have a bunch of people laying down in outfield grasses before practice, going through that stuff. And tell me how would you, if you were a coach, how would you implement this?
Number one, make it a priority.
There it is. Say it louder from the back. Coaches, you can't do this and hand them a brochure and expect the mental game to be fixed. Can't do this. Make it a priority.
If there's buy-in from the head coach, the kids are going to buy in. I've been saying this word a lot lately, which I love. The kids are starving, and I say borderline desperate for any kind of mental nourishment, spiritual nourishment, quiet time, relaxation. This generation, between COVID and technology and social media, never before, if you go back 200 years, never before, based on the rhythms of life, have we taken on so many things. And so I would just say, as a coach, I try not to guilt coaches into doing it, but I'm like, look, if you have your kids for 2 or 3 hours a day, and if you knew the greatest impact you're going to have on their lives is going to be 10 or 15 minutes of breathing and relaxation and meditation. And we have so much information on YouTube that's free on how to take your players through a meditation. So at first it could be intimidating. At first it could be a little bit like, how do I do this? But we've broken it down. I've done a couple of podcasts with Jeremy Sheetinger, who's the head coach at Georgia Gwinnett College. And he's just one of the brightest minds, and huge. They meditate every single day for 20 minutes. His second year at that program, they won the national championship. It's a way of life. And so I would just say, as a coach, instead of thinking like, I'm not sure how to do this, or I would say, look at it the opposite way. Like, I want to do this because it's the biggest piece that I can give to the kids. And the other thing is a lot of times coaches worry that the kids may not buy in. I've been doing this for 33 years. I can tell you the last 3 to 7 years, and I know you know this as well, these kids are starving. They love it. When I've had so many coaches do this, when they lay the kids down and they're a little bit worried about what the kids are going to think, they're blown away on how pumped the kids are. And they're like, Coach, can we do this again tomorrow? And because I'll end on this point. intuitively as creatures, we know we're desperate for this quiet time. We're desperate for some relaxation. We're desperate to learn how to be quieter in our minds. So if you lead someone to that, the effect is going to be way more visceral and dramatic than I think people understand.
You've crushed it on this point. The things to think about, y'all. Our generation is the most anxious we've ever seen on record. Okay, anxiety's through the roof, perfectionism through the roof. This is a critical element that people need to learn, and it doesn't have to be a 45-minute transcendental meditation process.
Yeah.
Okay, the simple breathing can allow them to connect to the present moment. It's the only thing that's truly automatic in our life that recenters us. And it's, I always tell people, if you're going to hyperventilate, the first thing the body does after it hits the ground is it starts breathing right again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's funny how that works. Okay, and I don't want you to hyperventilate. Now, to that point, when you do teach breathing practices, let your teams and let your folks, even you, have a minute or two to kind of reconnect, because something happens. Because most of us are mouth breathers. We're breathing stress, that once we start reconnecting to our breathing, we tend to flood our brain with a lot of oxygen. And so people tend to get a little lightheaded at times. So give them a little chance, okay? But what you're going to hear is people say, God, that was good. Like, okay, what did that cost? 3 minutes? I wish every teacher in America would take 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes after lunch to do this and allow people to breathe and just be where your butt is, be where your feet are, right?
I believe, and I've thought the same thing for probably almost since I started. If kids starting in kindergarten, nursery school, took 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, and as you said, it would be a great way to close the day down. And even if they don't know what they're doing yet, but they just, as you said, connect with this intuitive, instinctive part of us, I think our world would flip overnight into such a healthier, mentally healthier, physically healthier, emotionally healthier, psychologically, spiritually healthier. And I do feel like it will happen. It might take another 20 years and it might take another 40 years. I hope it happens in the next few years, but I hope it happens tomorrow. But I think we all know that based on the stuff that's going on in this world, that's what now let me use that word, desperate again, or starving.
Yeah.
The kids may not be running up to your room and saying, I'm desperate, coach, to meditate today. But boy, when they get exposed to this, it hits them hard, and it's a life changer. And I think the reason you and I are both so passionate about this, and anybody in the mental training field is so passionate about this, is because we've seen it change people's lives in one session or one conversation. And that's why we love what we do, because we're trying to help people live the best version of themselves possible.
It's funny. One of the things I tell folks, and coaches have to be careful in today's world about this, so I want you to understand, but when I'm with my tour players, I'll say, can I touch you real quick? When I walk up to them, and I'll just make the comment of like, hey, I'm going to touch them on the shoulder while I talk to them, because there's something amazing that happens. And I'm sure you've done this too, is when you touch somebody, and like I said, you have to ask for permission. Okay. So don't just go up and touching people. But what happens is the breathing synchronizes and the heartbeat synchronize.
Interesting.
And when you walk up to them, we're energy folks, right? And so when our energy's high, we don't breathe real deep. And if I walk up to a guy and they're practicing or whatever, and I'll put my hand on their shoulder and be like, hey, I don't even have to say anything. And I remember Coach Burtman used to do that. He'd come to the mound and he'd put his hand on your shoulder. And it was such a brilliant connection. Yeah. He shared a study from the NBA years and years ago. Like I said, we can't do it anymore, but coaches that touch their players in huddles had a much higher success and win rate. And I think that's where breathing goes hand in hand. If you're touching them in their lives, okay, you're touching them and teaching them those, we're great. So if there's any questions for Alan, love to hear them. If not, we'll send it to him and go from there. But man, you are the best. Bash, any questions?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's one that came in. How do you beat all the other best players that are practicing meditation and mindfulness, and what separates the greats, if that's even a question that you can answer?
I mean, look, it's sort of like physical training, right? However good you are, you're trying to be the best version of yourself and physically get better. Wherever you're at mentally, you're doing the same thing. So it's always going to come back to, I have a chapter in my book called Mastering Yourself. It's always going to come back to, how great can I be I just need to be the best version of myself, physically prepared, mentally prepared, emotionally prepared, etc. And so I think that's the easiest way to answer it. I wouldn't really, it's great if they're all doing it too, but I think Brett would obviously agree with this, that if you're dealing with any athletes that have achieved any success consistently, generally speaking, they're just so focused on mastering themselves.
Yeah, and being where they are. Look, one of the things that I found, I've suffered from anxiety my entire life. I've had panic attacks. One of the things that I do is I drive with the radio off at times. And I just want to hear the sound of the road, and I just want to be with the road. And I think that has been something that's really helpful to me. What's the title of your book?
Getting Focused, Staying Focused.
There you go. So make sure you check it out. We'll post a link to our social media. We'll put a link on here so people can buy it. Buddy, love you to death, man. Thank you so much. We're going to make it out to California at some point, come spend some time with you. But you're a legend. You're the best. And yet here you are with bands and throwing programs, but actually impacting the people more in the way that they think and breathe. And I told you the story. One of my teammates came back from the Cape Cod and ended up being one of my roommates. He's like, dude, we met this dude up there that made us breathe and count, and I couldn't get past 2. But this guy, and that was Mike Neal, if you remember Mike Neal, who was a legend. Yeah. And
Mike,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, the cool thing about that is I was like a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was 28 because it was 1992.
You were the cool coach then.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you were the cool coach. The 28-year-old coach when you're 19. That's the cool dude.
I was out there, and Rich Hill was the head coach, and John Schiffner was the assistant, and Dave Taylor. And what was cool is we made it optional, but I met with all the guys on day one, explained what I was doing. And so we met an hour before the early outs. So that's how early we were there. Yeah. And I had a few guys make every session the whole season, like all 10 weeks. And Mike was one of them, and he loved it. And Ronnie Rance was another guy, I think around the same period, and Harry Barrios. Harry Barrios, right?
Harry Barrios, yeah.
Those were the LSU guys on the team. Mike and I actually stayed in touch a little bit. It's been a while, but no, that was the cool thing is that at the time, 1992, I could feel it. Like no one, I'm not saying no one, but it felt like no one was really talking about meditation, and I felt like this is the engine of the car. Like
the cool stuff, man. You should have come down to Baton Rouge, because I think we were doing some things that you would have gotten jazzed about. You would have loved
Jay Johnson, so you know.
Oh, I know.
Jay's a very dear friend of mine, and I go back to 20-something years with Jay from USD. And
so when I went down and met with him in October, spoke to the team about being an alum, and Jay I told him you and I were buds, and he's like, oh, jeez, I got pressure now. And I'm like, buddy, with that roster, you ain't got pressure. Oh my God. Holy cow. I've never seen a roster like that in college baseball. I mean, Dylan Cruz is maybe the best college player I've ever seen, ever. Sitting 520.
Jay is also, not that Dylan's not a great hitter, but boy, Jay can teach hitting. And I appreciate this, man.
Dude, listen, make sure you check him out, Jager Sports. Check him out.
Much love. Love back. Thank you for having me on, man. It's always a treat and an honor.
Well, thank you. And y'all check him out. We're going to talk about that. And next, we're going to talk about how to slow down your mind. A little bit built off of this in the biggest moments after this. Love you, man.
Love you, brother.
How about that, man? I mean, you're talking about mindfulness, you're talking about meditation and the things it takes to be great in the moment. You know, now that you're an ex-player, do you look back at that and say, God, I wish I had spent a little bit more time in that environment? I don't know how much you did back then.
Well, we had a little bit towards the end of my career, and I wish I'd have had it a little bit earlier because, You know, it really helps. And the meditation is something that's really helped me, not only like from a sporting aspect, but really just my entire life as someone who's suffered from anxiety. And it's
Mhm.
just kind of like overtaken. Like the meditation has really um, played a huge role in kind of combating anxiety. So always interesting. And, you know, I've always heard of Alan Jaeger for as long as I've played baseball. So
He's a legend. I'm
yeah,
sure he was out surfing this morning. I'm sure he'll be out there in the morning.
100%. Yeah.
100%. He's probably got his Vans on or his Converse or something, no socks and just
Pretty
chill.
standard. Yeah.
Pretty standard hoodie in the background. Love that guy to death. I mean, listen, meditation, this is not something that has to be a major practice. Meditation and mindfulness work together. Okay. Mindfulness is just simply being mindful of what you're thinking without judgment. They work hand in hand. I love to meditate by being present where I'm at. My mind is so fast that I have a hard time slowing that down, so I don't fight it. And I want you to practice and study the way you do it. One of the best things, if you're a golfer, I tell players, hey, like when you get to the golf course in the morning before a tournament, just sit in your car for a few minutes and just be present. Before you go to the first tee, get us something to eat and sit off to the side and just be present with what you're thinking. We try to be smooth, we try to be aggressive, we try to be all those things. And they're oftentimes competing with one another because we haven't given them a place. And I know that as a pitcher, when I used to go to the bullpen, I would have this calming moment before the chaos came. But as soon as I got the call to go into the game, I would just stop for a second and take a deep breath and know that I was getting ready to enter the competitive environment, but knew where I was before I did it. I knew out there it was chaotic, but I knew how to center myself. I didn't try to calm down. I just tried to accept what I was feeling. And so I think that's something that's important. Look, the mind always races, all right? And competitive games and moments, it's all about what we do. And I'm so fascinated by watching players when they open up a little bit and talk about their interviews and they give insight. It's powerful, right? Because players will say, man, a quarterback was able to see a half a second more on the field. A basketball player was able to see the angles just a tad bit better. A golfer was able to accept, and they weren't as reactionary or emotional. That makes it great. And I think those are the things you have to think about. I'm talking about slowing down the game. I'm talking about putting it in your favor. And I think there's a couple of things that you can do. Before I get there, Bash, you and I were talking before we went live tonight about Caitlin Clark from Iowa. Mm-hmm. And holy cow, I wanted to make that the good, the bad, and the ugly as good, but she got trumped by Sam Burns. But the good is a 40-point triple-double to take her team to the Final Four. But man, have you seen her play?
Yeah, she's her range is like one step off the bus.
It's
a step off the bus.
It's
like it's the entrance to the arena.
Yeah,
but
she's
so good. Yeah,
yeah. But you listen to her speak, and there was a great interview on ESPN. Look it up with Jason Williams, who knows something about the game a bit, basketball.
I can link the article in the comments. I wasn't able to.
Okay.
I'm usually pretty good about ripping video, but wasn't able to rip this one.
Well, no. Well, if I gave you more than a minute. So one of my tour players reached out today and said, dude, did you see that interview with Caitlin Clark? I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, dude, she's talking about being in flow state, about it's all process oriented. It's all about the little things. She sees herself in that position so that it's never a surprise. And he's like, that's what you've been working with me on and how I'm trying to do it. And he's had a really good last couple months because he started connecting and believing that he could handle anything. That's how we slow down the mind. So here's 5 tips to slowing down the mind under pressure. All right, number 1. Well, here we go. You're going to hear some commonalities here between what Alan says and the funnel of focus, which you're going to see here in a minute. Okay. And first of all, be aware of what's happening around you. I always tell people, and you heard me say this to Alan, I want my players in the big moments to be tourists, observers, not judge. They're not the judge and the jury of what's happening to them. They're the observers. They're paying attention. I had a player a long time ago tell me, try to see myself in third person. Like if you ever play video games or an NASCAR game where you're sitting behind the car instead of being in the driver's eye. That third person view can allow you to be aware of what's happening because I want you to avoid judgment. That's number 2. Stop being an ass to yourself. Stop it. Nobody cares. I find that most people, when they get really hard on themselves, it's because they're frustrated that their practice abilities haven't transferred. They don't. You got to bridge them. And two, they want other people to realize how hard and good they are. No one cares. Get it done. Stop judging yourself. Instead of thinking that it's going to go easy, embrace that I have a place to go, and anchoring my breath and physical, that I can embrace every challenge. Because then once I've accepted non-judgmentally, I can create a plan. Look, you can create a plan anywhere you are, anything you're doing, it doesn't matter. All you have to do is just be aware that where you are is not because you suck, you're terrible at it, you can't deal with it. Instead, focus on what you can do, create a plan, then execute that plan according to what strengths you have. Don't try to be a Superman, Superwoman. Play what you know, play to your best of your ability. And finally, you accept the outcome. So be aware of what's happening. Don't judge and be an ass to yourself. Okay. It's not the time. If you want to do that 2 hours after competition, that's fair. But you'll notice that you really never do, because the emotional reactions go away. No matter where we are, we can create a plan. I asked a player yesterday this. I said, if you hit a ball in the right rough behind the trees, would you be ticked? He's like, yeah, be furious. And I'm like, okay. Well, if you're going to be furious in that situation, why? I can't believe I hit it there. Okay. If I walked over there and dropped the ball and said, all right, bud, I want you to challenge yourself and see what you do, you'd be like, I'd show you that I could get this ball out of there and play. I'm like, the ball is freaking neutral. You're choosing to bring that aggression and anger towards yourself for some reason. Why? Because you want to punish yourself. Stop punishing. Be aware. No judgment, create a plan, execute it with intention and purpose, and finally accept the outcome, and we reset and refocus. Wow. Breathing does help in that situation. Slows down the mind. You know, when you're in the moment and you're driving and your Google Maps or your Apple Maps can't find where you are, it's just spinning. You got 3 people in your back seat yelling at you which way to turn. Turn left. No, go straight, go straight. Turn up the radio. Turn it up. No, go. And somebody's on the phone. You can't think. Breathing helps quiet everybody down in your life. And then create a plan. You want to slow down your mind, breathe, anchor into something, and follow these 5 steps, which in the heat of the moment aren't that hard because they're very much like the funnel of focus. We talked about in our very first episode, the funnel of focus is about having a game plan that allows your mind to funnel in like that. I know we have a graphic in just a second. You got that one, Bash? There it is. So the awareness comes in. So be aware of what's happening, develop a strategy, visualize, see it, breathe it, and execute. Okay. Where we get in trouble is when the mind goes the opposite way. Okay. And the worst part is when we get upset and we get chaotic, or instead of our funnel working like this, it works negative. That's awareness tells me, oh my God, we have a freaking problem. I can't do it. And then what happens is the strategies about how to get out of the trouble we're in, and we don't actually work through it. And our mind is racing, and we look for the first path of calm, first path of relief versus execution. And by the time you get over the ball, the time you step in the box, coach is yelling at you, you got 4,000 thoughts in your head. You've got to learn how to flip your funnel. And guys, women out there, taking a deep breath can start. As I've said in the Fix and Frankie, don't be in a hurry to F up. Okay? This gives you a situation. If you're frustrated and you're angry and you want to hurry up and get out of it, what is 5 more seconds going to do? It's only going to help you. So to slow it back down, slow down your mind so you can execute a clear game plan to get out of trouble. You want to know the difference between the great players and everyone else? It's this right here. It's not that they're calm. It's that they can find a plan no matter where they are and they get executed. When we come back, we're going to answer your questions here on Mental Game Live. All right, so we're going to go down into our questions. Now, this is one of the cool parts of Mental Game Live. I want to answer your questions. I get bombarded with DMs and questions. And I got to be honest with you, it's one of the greatest honors that I have as a professional is that people actually care enough about what I say. And that's very humbling. And I want to be able to answer your questions. Look, the mental game does not need to be a one-stop shop. It doesn't need to be anything else. It needs to be a process that we learn and grow. And if we're going to learn and grow, then let's get after it and find a place to do that. So every show, 4 segment, it's going to be Q&A. We're going to answer your questions, but I need you to be a part of it. And you can hit me up on social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, wherever. We'll collate the questions, but they're best when you bring them here because it means you're watching live. So what we got tonight, Bash? Whoops, you're on mute. You're on mute. Technical difficulties.
My bad. Just
that's a
hear
ball.
my clicking buttons that it's a ball for. As if you watch Trevor Bauer's stuff, that's a walk. You get a free heater down the middle. So Mark on Twitter says, I had my best season last year, winning a couple of tournaments, and now I'm perceived as a favorite. I'm practicing harder than ever, but how do I not put too much pressure on myself? Hashtag need to know.
Hashtag need to know. You know, one of the biggest things that happens when people have success is they start expecting success to follow. And they expect it to follow because they hope it will follow, not because they know they'll follow. You probably had your best season because you just grinded with no expectations. And people say, well, shouldn't you expect to win? No, you should believe you can win. You expect nothing. Nothing. Okay? So the thing about it is if people are expecting more out of you, you're probably feeling that as well. If you're the favorite, you know people are gunning for you. It's harder at the top of the mountain. Remember Coach Saban and I talking about being on top of the mountain. And I gave the team the analogy is that climbing the mountain is most treacherous at the top because everybody's gunning for you. Everybody wants to stand where you're standing. So you have to be that much better every day, not by adding pressure, but by refining your processes and getting better in those moments. But the big mistake that people make when they're in the big moments and they're having to trying to recreate success is they don't allow themselves to work into success. They instead expected that result to be there easier as if it was easy last year. It wasn't easy last year. It's always freaking hard. But the year before, you were probably better at working your way into that position by taking whatever came your way and making the most out of it. So don't be so hard on yourself. Work and learn how to be in the lead. Players have to learn how to be number one in the world. It's one thing to achieve it. It's another thing to stay there. And that's what's important.
Nice Saban name drop there.
Well, I mean, I have a couple rings from being there, so I can't complain.
Oh.
It's cool when you give them information and you hear it in
a
news conference. That's really cool.
Mic drop.
Okay,
this one is from Darren on YouTube. How do you mentally prepare to win an event back-to-back? What is the mental strategy for that?
Well, it goes right back to what we're talking about, right? Is that when you had success, a lot of times what it took to get on top was, very accepting, fighting through, not expecting anything. So to me, if you're going to try to win an event back-to-back or win the next week, it's the reason players on tour struggle with that, is that they tried to recreate that. Look, you can't how many of us have had a great meal, phenomenal meal, didn't even expect it, walked in, had this killer meal, and then you tell everybody about it, you go, and it's like, rah, rah. Okay? I call it the hangover effect. Remember when the movie The Hangover came out? Everybody was like, dude, it was the funniest movie ever. And people who went and saw it were like, it was good. But when they saw it completely fresh, they were like, oh my God, laugh my ass off, right? Because you had no expectations. So to me, what you have to look at is, hey, you're playing really well in whatever you're doing, okay? But you have to stay focused on the process that got you there. Bill Walsh, when he won his first Super Bowl with the San Francisco 49ers, a reporter said, man, it's got to be great. You got a lot of players that won a Super Bowl. He said, great. Now I've got a lot of players that have won a Super Bowl. Now they're going to want their own stuff. They're going to want their own attention. They're going to want their touches. They're in contract years. They're not sacrificing for what it takes like we did last year. So experience is great, but when we change the dynamic, that's where we get in trouble. So back-to-back tournaments, you got to work really hard, staying in the present. Scotty Scheffler said that this week. You come off the Players' victory. He was playing in the match play where he's had a final, a runner-up, a win, and he was in a big position again. He said, I just didn't even really focus at all on last year. It's a brand new year, new feels. And I thought he did a great job of that. He just got beat by a better player that day.
This one's from Andrew on YouTube. What's the best way to overcome your nerves the first day of a tournament?
Well, you can't overcome them. So I think one of the things that Alan talks about, which I believe in, is that we're not going to fight them. Okay. We're just going to accept them. Breathing allows us to accept them. Okay. It's kind of like telling somebody, if you've ever been on an airplane with somebody who's afraid to fly and you're like, just calm down. It's no big deal. They don't calm down. Okay. You just need to say, hey, look, just ride with it a little bit. Or like, you can't fight the turbulence. Just sit back and it's like driving on potholes on a road. It's no big deal. Okay. So instead of calming down, what I like players to know is, look, when you start a golf tournament in the first 3 holes, you probably don't have your feels. And in baseball, we used to call them what? What do we call that in the starting home team pitcher, Bash? What do we call that?
It's the inevitable 2.
Boom. See, Bash played for a coach that I played for. He's in our program. Like he's in our family tree. So starting home team pitchers give up the inevitable 2. Why, Bash? Why? Come on now. Why?
Bullpen mound is different than the game mound. Still trying to get used to the umpire's zone.
Got adrenaline.
Adrenaline, yeah.
You're facing their great hitters. Their hitters are always better when they have adrenaline. Pitchers are good if they're used to it, but you don't have your feels. And
don't
so
have the feels.
You got to know your feels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, I can tell you the number of times I left the bullpen and I didn't have a slider, and the first slider I threw on the mound was like, oh yeah, that thing's nasty. I don't know why. Okay. Very rarely did I not have it because that was the only thing I did have. But the thing to remember about this, and it's important to know, is that, when you go to a tournament, a lot of times when you're starting, you got a lot of anxiety and stress because of the uncertainty of competition. You don't know how it's going to go. So the mind starts telling stories. It starts flooding you with fears and doubts and risks. Better thing to do is say, wait, this is a tough part, first 3 holes. Let's hit shots that we know we're highly confident in. Simplify our process. Let's commit to them and let's be accepting and work ourselves into the round. It's a great way to do it. The inevitable 2.
Next time you watch a baseball game, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Happens more in college. It happens. It's funny when you watch experienced major leaguers, they have no problem with it. First inning, they come out, but they're not throwing 4 pitches. They're usually throwing 1 or 2 pitches with, usually, they're not trying to be super fine. They're going to what they know.
This one's from Jennifer on YouTube. Jennifer says, I'm a 52-year-old amateur female golfer, was competitive in high school, did not play in college, married, raised the kids, now I'm back. What are some tips to manage my golf game better? I need 5 to 7 strokes. All
right. So first of all, I love women coming back to the game. And a lot of times I hear women, my daughter's one of them, who comes back to the game and they'll be like, well, I don't want to get in the way of people. Men can be very judgmental on the golf course. And so what that does is that puts pressure on women to outplay what they're doing. So making an assumption, but I hear that a lot and I get that a lot in DMs. Let me say this. If you're out there competing, you want to shave some shots. There's a couple things that I would do. I'd work on your short game around the greens. I find that players, when they're returning to a game after being away, they're not as good around the greens as they think they are. And you're more likely your ball striking is not as good as it once was. So therefore we need to get better at one of those 2. Ball striking usually takes a little bit longer. So let's get better around the green. Number 2, let's get better with our short putts. Statistics, Dave Pelz's data shows amateur players, as they're trying to reduce their handicaps, need to get better around shorter putts inside 5 feet. Doesn't take a lot of talent. It just takes freedom, the ability to face anxiety in those situations and play well. So those are 2 areas. The other one, get out there and give yourself some patience. Work towards it. Set a plan to start cutting strokes back. Shave 1 shot off every 36 holes. 1 shot every 36 holes. Not 1 shot around. 1 shot every 36 holes. That's a half a shot around. Okay. Start there and watch what will happen is all of a sudden you start getting balls up and down. You start hitting more fairways. You start hitting better shots, getting distance there. You start getting more comfortable in your own game and you start playing better and you'll have more fun. Great questions, Jennifer.
This is from Kobe on YouTube. I'm a high-level college golfer and play at a 2 handicap. When I start getting hot in the course, I sometimes spook myself and worry about score too much and struggle to close good rounds. How do I remedy that?
All right. So here's a funny thing I always hear in golf. I get so obsessed with score. Name another sport that doesn't care about the score. Did you know what the score was at a game, Bash?
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
Big old scoreboard out there, right?
In the face.
What's that?
Right in the face.
Right in your face. Okay. What happens to golfers is they hold on. They're like, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't. I mean, I may shoot my low score. The fact is they look at the scoreboard as a predictor of the future. Use the scoreboard when you think about it, okay, as a trigger to recenter back. George Mumford, who wrote The Mindful Athlete, one of the most brilliant mindful coaches out there in the NBA, talked about training prisoners in jails because they would get angry when the alarms would go off because they had to go back to their cell. And what he did is he trained them to not be reactionary to the sound, but instead to use the ringing of the alarm as a trigger to go back in and be mindful and breathe. So when you think about the score, reset and be like, right here is all that matters. I can't play the 18th hole before I played the 5th hole. Play the 5th hole right now. It's a simple way. The score happens. And I know you'll say, well, one time I didn't know what the score was. Okay, great. One time I got 10 nuggets instead of 8. It happens. But what I want you to do is instead focus on what you can do every day. And that's use that as a way to reconnect. Let's do 2 more questions.
All right, this one's from Jose on YouTube. I'm a junior golfer and I'm trying to relax more on the golf course. I want to prove to everyone that I'm better than them, but I get overwhelmed when I can't prove that I'm better than them. Prove.
Listen, if you're out there playing golf to validate your ability, you will get beat every single time. You'll get beat. And golf, it's so funny, right? There's so much more vanity associated with it. And I get it. I know that's not what you're saying. But I hear players like, I know I need to prove to people I'm good enough to be out here. I need to prove to people that I'm good enough to be on tour. I need to prove to my sponsors, all those other things. What I want you to understand is that if you're trying to prove, you're not competing because you're holding on as tight as possible instead of being free and working through it. What I want you to do is compete. Stack the reps together. Stack the holes together. And let people come up to their own opinions, okay? You can play your best, people still think, oh, it's not good enough. Or, but you got to look at golf like an obstacle course on the show Wipeout. You're out there competing and running. You don't know where the trap doors are. So if you're trying to prove yourself, you're going to get caught up by the trap doors. But if you can look at it instead of, listen, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a challenge. And I think that I think that's the thing that I'm really good at is facing those challenges and dealing with it. Just like Burnsy this past week, getting 2 down. He had a game plan. Thankfully, his caddy knew how to bring that up in him, and that's why they won.
Last one from Tim on YouTube. I play with a group that is excessively fast. When I'm up, I get anxious and find it hard to focus and feel like taking an extra breath is holding up the group. Any tips to get around that?
Well, 68 shots is always faster than 78 shots. So do what you got to do and don't be in a hurry to F up. Okay. If they like to play fast, that's great, but don't be afraid to take a slow down and work through it. They'll deal with it. I mean, as long as you're not excessively slow. But a lot of times it's like public speaking. You think you're speaking a lot faster than you actually are. And people say, oh, I took too long of a break there. Well, you took 2 seconds. Okay. Slow down, be present where you are, work your process because you'll enjoy it more. I want to have one comment. There was a good question that popped up here. I can see from Jay Kavanaugh, Doc. Thinking of writing a book, has it gotten you clients or was it more of a credibility play? Let me say this, Doc. I think this is the way I'd look at it. It was a way to, I write to me. And I think if you write to one customer or client, I think you're going to have a better outcome. What I mean in that is write to somebody as a target. It's something I learned from Ryan Holiday, who wrote The Obstacles Away when we spent some time together. I write to me. So Mindside Manifesto was a way that I documented my philosophies. Break Free from Suckville was to get a client or 2 out of Suckville that were seeing me. And the book I wrote on anxiety is one hell about me. So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting question that I wanted to answer that I wouldn't have a way to follow up on. So I love to write. I wish I could write a book a year, but I won't write a book unless I know it can make an impact. I'm not publishing books just to publish them. I'll leave that to some of my colleagues. I want to write a book that makes a difference. So yes. I don't mean that's bad. People write all the time, but I want to write something that is makes a difference. Like one of the reasons why, I thought you were awesome was you told me Mindset Manifesto was one of the best books you'd read. I was like, damn straight. Brett knows what he's talking about. Bashman knows.
Yeah. Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. You said, man, that book. You said there's about 3 books in one, but that is true.
Oh, I definitely said that.
You definitely said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I write dense. I admit that. So Hey guys, question and answer is great. I want to try to answer every single one of them. Maybe on the next episode, we'll spend more time answering questions if you guys like this. We got to hear your feedback, y'all. When is that book on anxiety coming out? I got 2 people reading it right now who need to finish it. How about that? But I do think that we've got to we got to answer more questions. So I need to hear from you. Social media, hit me up. YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Let us know your comments of what you like about Mental Game Live. This show is for y'all. And I love doing it. The next one we're going to do is the Monday following the Masters, I believe. So we're going to be able to hopefully talk about something good. And hopefully my guys play great. So, Bash, any follow-ups before we get out of here?
No, I thought it was a good one. Loved hearing from Alan.
Yep.
Always be to contribute whenever I can.
Wow.
I learned some things today.
Yeah, I love having you on and sharing ideas and talking. Let me just give you guys. Let me give you a little insight into coaching at the Masters. Okay. This is the coolest thing in the world. So I used to not go to Augusta because it was hard to coach there. And they have a lot of limitations, which are totally cool for the patrons. Like, we don't need to have 6 people around a player on the range, 1 coach, 1 caddy, so the patrons can watch. And I think that is awesome. And so when a player goes out on the golf course, I just become a patron. I walk around and I watch. Well, one of the very first ones I went to in person, I'd gone before, but one of the first ones I went to was in November when the COVID delayed the Masters. And it was only coaches, players, and members on the grounds. And you're walking the grounds with the members. You're walking around. They had all the concession stands open and they were free. And I was stacking cups because I've got them in my house. And they had little green lines painted on the ground. There was no ropes. And nobody crossed those lines. What I love about the Masters and the members at Augusta National is that they have their standards and their boundaries. And people respect them. Why? Tradition, integrity, respect, and they treat you really well. For coaches, we have a little area that we sit. We have all the concessions lined up in the refrigerator for us when we get there. So I'll start off the morning with an egg salad sandwich, probably mix in a bagel or something. Then after my players go play, I'll run in there and grab a pimento cheese and an egg salad and go walk the course. I'll go to the merchandise building. I love it. It's the pinnacle, right? And when I first went 15 years ago, a friend of mine was a resident of Augusta, and he took me. He had family tickets. And I left, and I said, I'll never be back until my players are playing. At that time, I had no players that were playing. I wasn't even doing this. But I said, I'll never be back until I'm coaching. So I think this is my 5th year in a row to go. Hope to go every single year. Hope to have players there every single year. And I'd love to see one of my players put on the green jacket. So to me, it's the ultimate pinnacle in the game of golf. It's a place I respect. I love getting to know the members and talking to them and hearing their stories and their experiences because it's about tradition. And I grew up playing a game of baseball, which was about tradition. And that's why I think I respect Augusta National so much. So we'll see you guys the Monday following the Masters, and hopefully we're celebrating something good. Till then, thank you so much for being a part of my life and Mental Game Live. I hope we don't disappoint you. Instead, I hope we continue to raise the bar every day, and we'll see you April 10th.